So, we are at that time again, the time to choose our mains. Now, just like we did this 2 years ago, the point of this video is to try and help all of you guys in choosing your mains. Ultimately, it is a subjective topic. However, after playing beta for long, extended periods of time, maybe I can give you some pointers for you to choose your main and give you my own thought processes that may help you out as well. Now, as some of you might know from my last choosing main video, I went as a mage in Battle for Azeroth, and though mage wasn't amazing gameplay wise, it was essentially a more boring version of Legion, I had an absolute wonderful time with it. Everything that I wanted and everything I said in that video paid off in spades. Being able to be involved in a fight so much beyond the capabilities of my past main, which was a DK, was simply awesome. Now, sadly, I quit the BFA just at the launch of 8.1, so I actually didn't get to experience the craziness of Fire Mage in 8.3, because when I came back, about 8.2, 8.3, I just went to my DK again and chilled out and didn't take the game seriously at all. That said, although my time with the Mage was relatively short, I loved being useful in a raid and in a group environment, to be able to get involved in many different ways that wasn't possible before. So partially I want that again. I want to be in a DPS spec class that has that equal meaningful toolkit, if not more, if possible. At the same time, there was one thing I felt that was missing when I was playing the Mage, and that was another role besides being just a DPS. I honestly missed being able to either tank or heal dungeons, Mythic Plus. The main reason being dependence. Dependence on a tank to log on, or a friend to be online, or having to ask someone if they could join up for this key run. And if you are in a pug world, well, that can be even worse, at least personally. All that said, that was my original goal, to find a class that could tank for dungeons, but also offer some of the things I loved about being a mage for raids. Now, there will be a twist to this that I will explain later on, but this is the first basic step you want to take. What role do you want? Do you want to be a pure DPS class, a tank, a healer? Would that be a melee to be close to the action, or a ranged and deal with a fight in a different way? Do you want the option to tank or to heal as an off-spec? What do you value in it? Do you want to have a meaningful kit with unique utility to a raid or group or Mythic Plus? Do you value mobility, immunities that really shine in some raid mechanics, or some unique utility like, say, a shroud or bubbles like Bop from Paladins, and so on and so forth? Do you want to really get involved in fights, and maybe a mage or a hunter will be perfect for you? Or you don't really care about that and are willing to forfeit some of those aspects a bit for a class that has a gameplay you really enjoy when it comes to pressing buttons. Maybe you could find one that has both. If you know all the classes, well, you can start picking and choosing the ones that do fit your criteria, your requirements, and then just play with them. Ultimately, playing will decide what you really enjoy. Utility, the toolkit in general, is something that you can look up and imagine yourself using it in a raid or dungeon environment, and then you can decide for yourself if that's something that you can live with or without. But on gameplay, only by getting hands-on experience will you know for sure that is something you truly enjoy. Be a proc-heavy spec like a Frost Mage, or a very deterministic one like a Balanced Druid or a Windwalker Monk. And if you don't know the classes well and what they offer, do research on them, or get on the PTR and test, since you have all the class changes there from Shadowlands, or wait for the pre-patch. I mean, it's pretty soon for you to make your final decision. Or, well, wait for my tier list pretty soon as well, but even then you should definitely still play all of them classes a lot. So, With that in mind, let's then get into more detail as to what I went through. I needed to find a class with two specs that I enjoy. One that offers a tank spec that delivers that tank playstyle that I enjoy for Mythic Plus, for dungeons, and a DPS spec for raids that I would enjoy as well, of course, and that was preferably useful, that had a safe spot in a raid due to its toolkit, that I could do much more beyond just pressing buttons. Okay, so we have the warrior, the paladin, the decay, the druid, the monk, and the demon hunter. Okay, these are all the specs that do offer a tank spec. So first, the decay. I played a lot with the decay in the past years, so I was not really leaning towards it because, like I said in my BFA video, I wanted something new, or rather, I want something new and fresh. However, it's been a while since I actually played the decay seriously, so whatever. So Blood. It's really amazing in Shadowlands. I mean, it's so good, it's super fun to play, quite powerful as well, a bit slow on mobility, which I always hated, but playing Night Fae you actually get another mobility ability on top of your baseline ones, and having that can really make a difference sometimes. But yeah, Blood is fantastic. And there are DPS specs on the Decay I really quite enjoy as well, like the Unholy. Unholy is awesome, and Frost, it's alright as well, it has its moments, but Unholy, it's really, really good. But I have one issue with the Decay. All the times I played my Decay in raids, especially in Legion, and I loved it in Legion, I never felt like I was this super valuable asset to the group. Yeah, sure, I did good damage on some fights with the breath builds, it really shined, but outside of that, battle res, well, there's other classes that can do it. Grips, yeah, they're really good for dungeons, but in raids it will be highly dependent on the fight. We do get Anti-Magic Zone now, which is really awesome, and a fairly unique ability that the DKs bring, that is also quite powerful for the new raid, so alright, maybe I could live with that. Still craving for a new experience, but in general, gameplay and my requirements, yeah, it's pretty much all there. So the Decay could be a very high potential main, right? Doesn't really offer the ability in the DPS specs to get super involved in a fight like the Mage, but I still feel like I can be useful. But before you commit immediately, looking at the other offerings is always a great decision to make sure you're not missing out on something you're looking for or that you didn't know you needed. Problem was, as I looked and analyzed the other classes, warrior, paladin, druid, and so on, an issue occurred as I looked at the roles I wanted of being a tank, primarily for dungeons, and a DPS for raids. And that issue was in Covenants. Yes, so Covenants did break this goal of mine completely. And it was the twist I said it was gonna happen because I wanted to express everything that went through my head to maybe help some of you that might relate to some of this. Covenants have some pretty amazing things, but they also have some really annoying things like the power they offer, conduits, abilities, and that can be really, really annoying to play around if you like to play a multi-role class and you enjoy playing these different roles in different types of environments. More so on, say, a druid or a monk or a paladin that offers all the three roles and you again enjoy playing all of them. Like myself, if I play a class that has a tank spec, a healing spec, and a DPS spec, I want to play them all. I feel wrong not playing them. Not necessarily for raids, but more so for dungeons. But knowing that certain Covenant abilities that work great with your DPS spec, that then don't work great with your tank or healing spec, it's horrible. And it's a horrible decision to make when you're looking at these Covenants, and you may like this Covenant for its theme, or you may like this Covenant for the ability that it offers for your DPS spec. But then it kind of sucks for the tanking spec that you want to use in dungeons. Like, say, Condemn on warriors. It's an amazing ability for Fury and Arms, especially in like raids, in single target fights and so on. But for protection? I mean, yeah, it works, but I much rather go for Ancient Aftershock to have this stun and have a lot more fun in Mythic Plus. And it's not about being optimal or for numbers or anything like that. For the level of content that I do, it doesn't matter. I don't like to push very high. I just go as high as the rewards go. It doesn't matter. It's about fun. And some are simply not fun in certain roles. And then you have the conduits with the weekly lockouts. What if I want to use the same soulbind traits for both specs or for all the 3 specs? I mean, it can be very frustrating, though there's a chance they might change that bit. And then there's the thematic side. Night Fae currently works for all the DK specs, which is great, though very likely to change due to tuning. It is very powerful. But being a Night Fae DK, yeah, that puts me off. I mean, the Night Fae are awesome, really, especially after the cinematic afterlives. But I don't want to be a fairy DK. It's not that I'm role-playing, but it doesn't sound right to me. It doesn't feel right, it doesn't look right. But that, on top of how unfriendly playing multiple roles, specs, but primarily roles, is in Shadowlands, I just had to say goodbye to the idea of me playing a multi-role class, and by consequence, the DK. I just stopped looking at all these other classes that offered all these multi-roles that I generally find fun and useful for all types of different environments and content in the game, but yeah, and again, it's not impossible, okay? I don't want to stay here and say, yeah, don't try and play a multi-role spec, or rather, don't go to a paladin thinking you're gonna be able to be protection and retribution at the same time. Like, you can do it, right? You can do it fine, but I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to think about, oh, I have to go to that covenant, but then what about protection, or about the other spec, because then the ability is not so good on there, it's not so fun. I don't want to deal with that, because the less you have to deal and the less you have to think about WoW, the more fun you will have with it. That's my motto. So, a pure DPS class it shall be. Choices are then thinning down. So, we have the Hunter, Lock, Mage, and Rogue in this category. And of course, there's my requirements. I don't need an S tier class in terms of damage. I'm valuing utility above everything to be a valuable asset in all types of group environments, and of course gameplay as well. I need to have fun when I'm pressing my buttons. Now, the Mage I'll cut off immediately due to the fact that it was my choice for BFI, and though I didn't play through all of the expansion with him, I always crave something new from a expansion to expansion basis, so I'll cut it. Now, it's a great class. Fire is a little bit right now with the Ignite changes, but Frost is fun enough, hasn't changed a lot, but is looking rather powerful, and the Arcane changes are also quite good, so Mage continues to be a very solid, safe choice that you can make. The Lock. Warlocks are super fun gameplay-wise, real fun. Also really quite powerful in practically every expansion. I really enjoy Affliction and Distraction, but they lack the mobility. I just hate it, man. Yeah, you have the portal and the burning rush, but damn, I hate it. Almost feels clunky to me to play a lock in a dungeon or a raid, or even in solo content. I mean, it doesn't feel right in my hands. If I'm just standing still and I'm being a turret, yeah, that's all good. But if anything happens that I need to move a lot or something like that, right, it just falls apart for me. And this is the case where playtesting matters a lot. Sometimes it isn't super logical or something that you can think up front, because I was thinking about the Warlock seriously for Shadowlands at first. When I moved on from the DK and playing a tank and all of that, it was my second best option in BFA, and now Affliction, it's even more fun, it's even better, so why not? But after playing it for a couple of days, I had to cut it, because it wasn't the type of playstyle that fitted me as a player. It's really fun mechanically, and I really like it in theory. It just lacked the tools that makes me feel comfortable while playing a DPS spec, especially ranged. So that leaves the Hunter and the Rogue. And the Hunter gets memed on a lot, especially, Beast Mastery, but Hunters are fucking awesome. The things you can do with it in a raid environment is amazing and almost unique. Your ability to DPS so easily while also dealing with mechanics on the move constantly is one of the biggest appeals for me. helping out the group in a variety of ways, and so you have, for the most part, always a safe spot due to how useful and stable they are. And MM isn't as versatile as BM, but still quite good in that aspect. Survival, unless you really enjoy the gameplay, the other two specs offer far more interesting things. So yeah, Hunter fits all my needs. It brings a unique toolkit with tons of ways to get involved in a fight due to their very high mobility, and by consequence, you are a very valuable asset. It is a pet class, but that doesn't really bother me. What about the Rogue? Well, Rogue also brings a fairly unique toolkit. You bring tons of value for many types of situations. Nice immunities and survivability, great mobility, Shroud for Mythic Plus, stable performance in terms of damage, usually anyway. So when it comes to that, is all there as well. Now, Hunter and Rogue both offer interesting things, however, one is primarily range and the other melee. So how can we break this up? How can I decide which one is the right fit for me? Well, both of them offer the toolkit that I'm looking for. So let's look at gameplay. While on the Rogue, my preferred spec is by far Sub. It's just so fun. Now, I know some of you are going to be, oh, flavor of the month, oh. And yeah, it's stupidly broken right now, but that isn't the reason why I find it super fun. Damage will be nerfed to the ground, for sure, with a legendary and covenant ability, and likely will be put back to be, in the middle of the pack, mid-tiers kind of thing in terms of performance, which is a great place to be honest. But it's the gameplay that feels super smooth and super satisfying with a new/old Shadowlands and with the new mechanics. For me at least, there's some faults, there's always is, but I find it super fun, satisfying, and I feel like I have things to learn that with experience and time I'll be able to take advantage of it more and more. And I really like that in DPS specs. Ceiling to get to reach. Maybe could even be the class where I could get into PvP again since my TBC days where I also played a Rogue. As for the other specs, they find Assassination is pretty basic, but I don't mind playing it, just it's not super exciting. It can be pretty exciting and fun in multi-dot, like say on these two boss fight cleave situations to keep up your poisons and bleeds spread. But yeah, it's fine gameplay wise, it's kind of relaxing in a way. And then there's Outlaw. Now, I don't really enjoy Outlaw, and it's a problem for sure. However, Outlaw tends to be really good in dungeons or mad cleave situations, and in that, I do find Outlaw to be fairly enjoyable because it's dumb fun to, easily cleave everything. So I think that's fun as well. So I feel like, yeah, for this fight or Mythic Plus, it would be really good if I play the Outlaw. I could respect for it. Totally fine. There's a conduit situation, but I would be totally fine. I would have no issue with that. What about the Hunter then? Hunter is super appealing. However, like the Lock, after playing it for some extended periods of time, yeah, again, it's offering all those amazing things in a group environment, more so than a Rogue in some ways due to the nature of you being ranged. But gameplay-wise, especially as a BM, when it comes to lashing out damage and pressing keys, it gets super old so fast. Man, it does. I'm really afraid that in a few months' time I get really bored of it. What if there's a raid or a fight where there's really nothing fun for you to do? And then all that you have left is that very simple, basic BM playstyle. That's a future problem, but a problem nonetheless. It can fall apart quickly. MM is much more interesting, for sure, but as marksman, you cannot really do what you do in BM. The aspect that appeals to me isn't really there for MM, because your mobility is slightly weaker due to the aim shots and no reliance on pets. And, in general is more evolved. So, yeah. And then there's survival, which would be essentially a dead spec in my hands because I don't really find it appealing. I know it's pretty good in PvP, but, it's a melee spec, which is something that I don't want to do when I play a Hunter. So yeah, ultimately, I think I will have to go for the Rogue. I mean, There are some concerns, absolutely. What if sub is absolute garbage after tuning? Now, again, I don't care much about numbers. Every class is viable for the type of content I do. But if it's absolute bottom tier by the end of the tuning, it can be a little bit depressing to then rely on assassination. And it's fine, but that's not the main thing I'm looking forward to play as a rogue. But either way, I either take that chance or I face the hunter problem. And contrary to hunter, all specs offer the same interesting tools, with sub being the one that is, slightly more mobile. As for covenants on the rogue, I don't really care much about the theme here. I don't mind if I go Fairy or Necrolord or Kyrian. It isn't like the Decay, where I feel there's a really defined theme with a class. Just the Kyrian ability is horrible to play with, so hopefully that won't actually be good in the end, or they change it completely. The others are fine. Bone Spike is really OP right now and fairly fun to use in dungeons, to spread all of those dots, but is very likely to be nerfed because it's so powerful right now. The Fey one is pretty fun for sub, since you get an extra vanish, but it's not very good for the other specs. But in general, the abilities tend to be fairly good for all roles, for all specs rather, except for the Fey one. And the Venthyr ability, it's fine as well. It's just boring because it's essentially a passive ability that you get, an extra poison. So abilities are fine, 3 out of 4. So yeah, rogue, it shall be. Feels right, makes sense, offers what I need. Now, for you might be in a similar spot or situation I was, or it might be completely different. But ultimately, test, test, test. That's my best advice. Play the spec you think you can enjoy as much as possible. Don't just rely on logs or someone saying, yeah dude, this spec is really OP right now, like sub currently. Play it for yourself, while also taking in mind what do you value in a spec, be it damage tools, or healing, or tanking tools. Do you value utility, support, or mobility, or defensives? What about your guild? Is there a role they need? Maybe that could help you push to a certain class if you cannot decide. Taking in mind, of course, if you really like it. Don't go for a class or a role because your guild needs it and you don't really enjoy it. You're gonna regret it later. Trust me. Been there, done that. And don't forget to calculate the pros and cons. Can you live with the negatives of a class and spec? Because every class is going to have them, be mobility, be lack of defensives, be lack of self-healing, and so on and so forth. Take all of that in consideration, and then take in mind Covenant abilities because this is Shadowlands. Do you value Covenant's theme, the thematic choice, or you just care about the ability? For me, both of those also took a toll in my decision, especially on the multi-role part. And maybe after weighing all of that, there will be that perfect pick. And if so, do let me know down below in the comments. Alright guys, so hopefully that helped some of you out. For me, it shall be the rogue, hoping to have some fun, and keep a lookout for the tier lists, and I'll see you all in the Shadowlands.